Welcome to the Grow Your Business and Grow Your Wealth podcast with Gary Heldt. Gary is an expert in helping business owners put together a plan that will provide a better future for their businesses, themselves, and their families. On the podcast, Gary interviews other professionals who share his vision, and together they share secrets and strategies any business owner can use to build a better financial foundation for your business and your life.
Hey, welcome back to the podcast. My guest this week is Katherine Sheehan, and she is a Managing Director and Wealth Strategist at Crestwood Advisors, where she brings decades of experience in estate planning, trust and estate administration, long-term care planning, and elder law. Welcome back.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Great. So, give our listeners your backstory and kind of what got you into specializing in the estate planning and elder law.
So it happened actually quite by accident. The law firm that I started working at when I was in college specialized in estate planning. And so that was in 1995. And I fell in love with it then. And I have been doing nothing but this since then. And so I knew I wanted to specialize in that. I knew then I wanted to go to law school. When I started working at that firm, I thought I wanted to go into politics, frankly. And so I did an about face, right? And fell in love. And so then when I was in law school, focused really my core curriculum on tax and estate planning, and then did this right from the start, and have been doing nothing but this since I started practicing.
That's cool. It's always nice to find that, hey, this is my passion and what I want to do, and then be able to go after it. Can you tell us, with business owners, many times business owners don't plan out that long term. So, there's a lot of mistakes that are made and stuff like that. Can you talk about the importance of the estate planning and everything when it comes to having a business?
Of course. So it's not just business owners that put off estate planning. It's I'd say the majority of folks put off estate planning. When I was practicing, I used to say that I was the last person that folks would want to come meet with. But business owners especially have a hard time sitting down with attorneys. And I think a lot of that is because they are very busy running their businesses, right? And they know this needs to be done, but it really is the last thing that they think about, which is unfortunate, right? Because the consequences of not doing this planning can be pretty huge and pretty unfortunate, right? And so the key is to start to have these conversations with business owners early and often, right? And really with a team approach. So it's not just the attorney going in and saying, hey, you need to do this, but it's the financial advisor saying, hey, you need to do this, and the tax professional saying, hey, you need to do this. So now in my role as a strategist, right, it's me circling the wagons, bringing in us as the financial advisors, the attorneys, and the tax professionals, and saying, look, we need to come up with a plan. We need to get them down at the table. We need to get there, because a lot of times they have no core estate plan in place, never mind even saying, what is the exit strategy? What are we going to do for business succession planning? So first it's, let's get a core plan in place, and then let's move on to succession planning. So it takes a village oftentimes to move the needle, to get them to sit down at the planning table.
I think lots of times, I talk to business owners, and this isn't even the estate side of things, but just more, hey, what happens if something happens to you where you're temporarily incapacitated and stuff like that? Can you talk about that a little bit for us?
Sure. So something else that they rarely think about, they think I'm going to be sitting in this seat and I'm going to run this business forever, right? So there is never a contingency plan, right? Or an exit strategy, frankly. And so there has to be that. And I have that conversation with business owners a lot. And so I talk with them about that has to be part of the process, right? So if you are unable to run things for a long period of time or for a short period of time, what happens, right? Who is the key man that's going to step into that role? Is there a key man that's going to step into that role? And are there the legal documents and the framework for that to happen? Because oftentimes there isn't, right? So are there corporate documents in place that would allow that to happen? Do you have a power of attorney in place that would allow that to happen? And a lot of times there isn't, right? So if they haven't done their core estate plan, they don't have a power of attorney. And a lot of times with business owners, I recommend that they do 2 powers of attorney. So they'll have one that is for sort of personal financial affairs, and then I'll recommend one just solely for the business, right? And so that's usually someone other than spouse, child, that's operating as the attorney. In fact, it's going to be key man with the business. And then also they need to look at their corporate books and records and see, are there documents there that need to be updated? And that's another place where we get a little lax with our business owners. Oftentimes their corporate books and records have not always been tended to in a timely manner, and we need to go back and freshen things up a little bit, right? So.
And I've noticed that happens, with I'm going to say the smaller businesses, or even if the family-owned businesses, that lots of times that piece of it isn't done, and it always ends up causing trouble down the road. So, a little bit of maintenance. Yes, it's a cost, but a little bit of maintenance. And I think that we need to look at it differently. It's not so much a cost as it is an investment. Because if we don't do this now, it's going to cost a lot more later.
Tenfold, 100%.
Yeah. You have recently written an article on the qualified small business stock. Can you talk about that a little bit? Tell our listeners what that is.
Sure. So I did that article, and the premise for that was I had been doing I was at a small conference for financial advisors, and I was talking about QSBS, and a number of them had absolutely no idea what that even was, right? And so I was thinking, okay, well, this will be absolutely a missed planning opportunity if folks have absolutely no idea what this is. And I understand that a lot of folks do not have the same passion for the tax code that I do, right?
True.
But this is something in the tax code that is a great opportunity for small business owners if it works, right? So QSBS is section 1202 of the tax code, and it basically says that if a small business owner meets these qualifications, that when they sell shares of their business, they can exclude up to $10 million of gain from the sale of those shares, right? So that's huge. It has to be a C Corp. It's only for shares that are acquired after 1993. There is a holding period for at least 5 years, right? It has to be a qualified small business that's operating in a qualified trade. And so we have to meet all of those nuances that are sometimes spelled out in the tax code and sometimes not, right? But if you meet all of those qualifications, there are some planning opportunities, right? And so that's huge, especially for business owners that are just starting out, right? So that oftentimes leads to a lot of planning opportunities that we can do really at the ground level, right? So if we can do some planning, when they're just starting out, because the other thing is when we're doing planning, it's also the assets of the business have to be less than $50 million, right? So we lose that planning opportunity once that small business has assets that are greater than $50 million, right? And so a lot of times we have a business that the assets take off, right? And then we lose the ability to plan with the QSBS. But if we do some planning with these shares beforehand, right? If we give them away or we put them in trust, things like that, then we can sort of spread the wealth of this $10 million exclusion by giving these shares to folks or placing them in trust and then spreading out the amount of folks that can benefit from that $10 million exclusion, which is fantastic. Now, there's folks that don't always like this because, C Corps are not for everyone. And again, you have to meet all the nuances of the tax code. But there are a lot of good opportunities here. There are other times when they can be missed too, right? So we had a client recently who came in and was asking about this and met all of the qualifications, except that they had been doing some, they were talking about succession with their father, and rather than giving the shares, they had purchased the shares from their father. And so the other nuance in the tax code is the shares have to be issued from the original issuer, right? And so either it has to be, they're your shares from the original company, or there is an exception that you can be gifted those or inherited, right? But you cannot purchase them from someone else, right?
Yeah.
So he lost the ability to use that QSBS exclusion when he purchased those shares from his dad. But had he had a discussion, right, with his tax professional and his estate planner and us, right, before this happened, we would have said, hey, let's talk about a different way to do this, right? And we can get the benefit of this exclusion.
Well, I think the big thing you're even saying, hey, to have talked to his tax advisor. I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of tax advisors that don't know anything about this. The other issue that we run into is that, and I think you mentioned it, there's a 5-year window there.
Yep.
And it's like, so that means there needs to be planning because, that small business owner, that their business is maybe worth $1 million or $2 million that they're going to be able to sell for. If they had enough lead time, they could convert it, to the C and do this. But again, that's 5 years. So it's not, we can't find out today that, hey, I'm in the process of selling my business, or I want to sell this and get out now.
Yeah.
So that takes, there's that longer lead time. How do you help these people that come in to you at that point in time? Because again, sometimes, it's too late.
Yeah. So, and a lot of times it is too late, right?
Right.
And this happens a lot too with it, and I spend a lot of time working with business owners. So that's a lot of our clients are business owners, and I've spent a good chunk of my career counseling business owners, both when I was practicing and now. And a lot of my discussions are around business succession planning. And so sometimes the timing is right, and sometimes it isn't. So sometimes they're coming to us wanting to mitigate capital gains, right? And what kind of planning can we do? That just had this situation happen. But LOI has already been signed. They're about to close, right? In 2 weeks.
Right.
And so it's, there isn't a whole lot of planning that we can do, right, when we're about to close.
Sure.
In that instance, we could do some donations, right, to a charitable trust or to a foundation, right, which would mitigate some of the gain exposure. Depending on what the makeup of the shares, that may limit the type of trust that you're able to place those shares into. But you're limited there too. So that is the benefit really of, again, having that team of experts in place and really, really talking about these things ahead of time, because sometimes there is not a whole lot that we can do and then then the discussion is, okay, well, let's look into next year, right? Let's look into what we can do to sort of mitigate exposure next year, or since we're going to have this huge gain problem, is there some tax loss harvesting that we can do, right? So that's where the financial piece, right, marries in with the planning piece, right? And they really go hand in hand. You really can't do one without the other. But that's why it's so important for all parties to be hammering this in, right? Because no part of planning should be done in a vacuum, right? The tax professional, the attorney, and the financial advisor all need to be working together and giving the client the same messaging, right? Because there can be lost opportunities if not.
Yeah. I think that, I'm always preaching that, you have to have your team of professionals. And one of the big things is sometimes your team of professionals, you need to bring somebody else in even that specializes, because I would tell you many CPAs don't know a lot of these strategies of how to reduce the capital gains and things like that. And it's maybe some bruised egos or anything else, but it's like sometimes you can bring in, that CPA that understands this to help just with this transaction, and then next year you can go, have the same person that's been doing your stuff do it. But the same thing with advisors or anything else, because not all of them are going to know all of these strategies. So it's important to make sure that your professionals that you have can help you with this, and be able to develop that team and let them talk, because many times there's not that discussion. So somebody's saying, oh, we need to do this, this, and this. And like you said, hey, that LOI is already in place and it's too late now, as compared to if everybody talked before stuff got put in writing and signatures put on, it would have totally changed some of the situations you're dealing with.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit more in those dynamics?
So great point, right, about the levels of complexity, right, with some of the advisors. Because a lot of times we have business owners who have worked with the same tax professional for however many years, and perhaps maybe the same attorney for however many years, and started out with them when they were doing very simple tax returns and had very simple estate planning documents, right? And their needs now are far more complex than they once were. And so those professionals are not adequate anymore, right? And because of that, those professionals probably missed some opportunities, right, along the way. And so I have seen that happen a lot, right? And I think I pride myself on being very diplomatic about sort of raising those issues and saying, hey, look, I think we need to bring someone else into the fold here who, it's usually your needs are more complex now than they once were. Your asset levels are far greater than they once were. And so let's bring someone else to the table, right? It doesn't mean we necessarily need to replace this person, although that is usually what ends up happening, right? But we definitely need to add to the team, and that happens a lot too, like in the fiduciary income tax space too. When we start to have a lot of trusts at play, there's a lot of fantastic tax professionals out there that are terrific at doing 1040s, right? They cannot do a 1041. It's okay, right? We just need to, or same, they can't do a partnership return, right? So we just need to bring someone to the table that can, right? It doesn't, and it doesn't mean they're not great at what they do. It just means we need to bring someone to the table that is, right? And so it's And a lot of times too, I've also had professionals that have said, you know what, you're right. This is greater than what I can do for this client. And let's bring this other person in. And oftentimes they're relieved, or sometimes, these are people that frankly should have, thrown in the towel and retired
Yes.
a long time ago. So, yeah, but I see that happen an awful lot.
Yeah, there's just I don't want to say quite daily, but there's constant changes that are going on, and if these professionals aren't keeping up with
Yeah.
what's going on, it has kind of passed them by, and I've seen many situations that this has happened. And it's got to be that the professional has to know their limitations and be able to say, okay, this is a little bit beyond, my scope, of what I know how to handle. We need to bring somebody else in. But I think many times as professionals, people's egos get in the way instead of worrying about what's good for the client.
Right.
The professional is worried about hanging on to the client.
Right. Right.
Um, and where do you see kind of this next generation that's coming up? Where do you see them fitting into this? Because it seems like their ideas of business and how to do things are much different than ours right now.
Indeed, they are. Indeed, they are. So that's I talk to our clients a lot about education and family discussions, a lot. And that used to be a dirty word, right? When I started doing this, we didn't have discussions with younger generations about wealth, about business, about any of those things, because God forbid if you did, they'd become ne'er-do-wells and they'd run off into the sunset and do God knows what, right? That really isn't the case. And if we don't start to have these discussions with next gen, the consequences of not doing so actually can be far more dire, right?
Right.
For first gen and for next gen, right? It can have consequences for the estate planning for next gen, but it also can have pretty dire consequences for these businesses, for real estate that folks want to hold on to, for all of these things. Because for business owners, they have it in their heads that, oh, my kid's going to take this business over. They want to have this. Most of the time, they do not, right? And we've all heard the statistics that these businesses do not last beyond second or third gen, right? And the reason is because these folks have not a whole lot of interest in hanging on, or they don't have the know-how to
Right.
keep these businesses running. Had they had these discussions early on about who is interested, and when they might want to start being involved, or should we just sell, right? Because sometimes that is the answer, right? Rather than, because that's sometimes what it is, right? So we start having these business succession planning discussions rather than transferring the business down to the next gen. Sometimes it is, well, maybe we should just sell this business because next gen does not want this business. Or we have to maintain family harmony too, right? And you might have one kid that's super involved and two that want nothing to do with it. And how are you going to equalize asset transfer in that instance, right? So there's all of these dynamics that we really have to, peel back layers of the onion and deal with. And you cannot do that unless you are having discussions openly and honestly. And it is hard to get folks there sometimes, right? So it's, you start you start baby steps, right? And then we get there. And sometimes, I've had a few clients where we're there and all things are in good shape, but most of the time they're not. And we have a lot of clients who just think, oh, they're going to take this over. And then when you talk to the kids, they have zero intentions of taking this business over, or they have zero idea what's happening, or they live across the country, or they don't have the aptitude to take it over. All of those things, which is a recipe for disaster, right?
Yeah, 100%. We've covered a lot here quickly. Our time always seems to go so fast. What have I not asked you that you wish I had?
So I think, one of the things I always start with clients is, because there's always so many things, no matter what we're talking about, right? And they always want to sort of jump into well, how are we going to get to this, right?
Right.
And what are the documents going to say to iron that out? And sometimes they find that to be paralytic, right? Which is why they don't go to the attorney or come to us to ask about it, or go to the tax professional. And that's what we don't want, right? And so the way that I try to get them out of that paralytic state is to say, let's just big picture, right? At the end of the day, where do you want this? Where do you want your legacy to be? Where do you want your wealth to go? If we're coming up on a liquidity event, what is your big picture? Let's think of it as a pie, right? Where do you want the pieces of that pie to go, right? And then once I have that big picture from you, then I can backfill all the details, and then we can fill out the mechanics of that plan. And then together we can put that plan together with your estate planning attorney, and we can build your financial plan, and we can work on the tax implications of that with your tax professional. So big picture.
Yeah. So Katherine, if people like what they have heard, how can they reach out to you? How can they get more information?
So they can reach out to me at Crestwood Advisors. I am at Sheehan at crestwoodadvisors.com, and they can reach me by phone at 617-226-0044.
Great. Appreciate your time. Always enjoy our conversation.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me back.
Great. Hey, this week my guest was Katherine Sheehan, and she is with Crestwood Advisors, and I'll see you guys next week.